Well, welcome to this edition of BCStrategies Industry Buzz. My name is Kevin Keeler. I am joined by a collection of BCStrategies experts, but I'm super excited because we're joined by Andrei Papancea from NLX, and we are going to talk about natural language processing and artificial intelligence, which is a super topical area. Before we kind of get to the experts, Andrei, why don't you introduce yourself and NLX as a company?
Happy to. Thank you, Kevin. Great to see everyone. To whoever is watching, thank you for taking the time. My name is Andrei Papancea. I'm the CEO and Chief Product Officer of NLX, an enterprise conversational AI company. I'm originally from Romania, if you're trying to place my accent. I grew up about 30 miles away from Dracula's castle, and yes, it's real. Not Dracula, but the castle, yes. But again, very excited to be here today and looking forward to the session.
So tell us a little bit about kind of NLX and your focus. You were just saying before we kind of went live that you, in, I guess, March of this year, celebrated your 5th anniversary. So talk a little bit about kind of the mission and vision of NLX.
Certainly. Well, for one, as I mentioned, we're an enterprise conversational AI company. We're headquartered in New York City. Our core product is a SaaS platform that allows you to tackle the soup to nuts of what it takes to operationalize conversational AI at enterprise scale. By background, I'm an engineer. I've been building and selling software for as long as I can remember. Ever since I was in 5th grade, my parents opened up an LLC so I can sell my web development and design services. And as a result of that, I got to just dabble with a lot of different technologies. I particularly enjoyed picking up projects I didn't quite know how to do, just because, one, they paid me, and two, I got to learn interesting things. Fast forward the number of years, I ended up moving to the United States for college, and then 2015 to 2016, I worked for American Express full-time, where I built their conversational AI platform from the ground up. So that's what exposed me to, let's say, the space. I got to evaluate the majority of the players operating in that in the natural language processing space, ranging from small startups like Wit.ai, API.ai before it became Dialogflow and was purchased by Google, all the way to companies like Nuance. And with the learnings at Amex and thereafter, I worked and consulted for companies like MasterCard, Discover, NBC, Universal, and others. I saw a gap in how the needs of the market weren't quite addressed by the technology vendors, and I made it my co-founders and I's mission to change that. Now, fast forward to 2023, conversational AI is at the forefront, as you mentioned, thanks to ChatGPT and the emergence, or I guess the popularization of large language models. But in context, NLX, think of NLX, and I'm sure we'll dive a little deeper into the details, but we sit at the intersection between practicality and hype. So we leverage state-of-the-art technologies, but we also ground them in what's feasible and possible for enterprise customers, and that's where we love to sort of operate.
No, that's some great background, and I love kind of the foundational story and kind of where you started and where you've gotten to. You know, I mean, obviously, natural language processing, AI, I mean, as you say, super hyped, and you know, there's obviously some real practicality. Let me go to one of the BCStrategies experts, Tom Brennan. You know, I mean, I know you play in the UC and contact center and also AR, VR, but AI space. So, you know, Tom, when you hear Andrei's story, I mean, kind of what pops out for you? What questions do you have?
Yeah, and Andrei, it's so great to meet you, and thanks for taking some time to share some of your story with us. One of the things that's been very kind of front of mind for me is kind of two different messages from the conversational AI as it applies to the customer experience. We hear how good it is and how it's developing very rapidly, and how it's getting very good at containing calls that used to have to go to a live agent, and now it can be contained. But we're also hearing from the same providers that no, it's not going to take all the agents' jobs. It's just going to take kind of the low-hanging fruit. So it's a little bit of a mixed message. Like our technology is really, really good, but no, it's not going to take a lot of agent jobs. And I'm trying to figure out, like, is that because the technology really just isn't even close to being able to handle a majority of agent calls, which is fine. There's still plenty of low-hanging fruit. I mean, there's still a massive opportunity for optimization, but you're in the middle of this. I mean, how far can we go? It's obviously not going to replace, every single agent, but how do you see this kind of, evolving in the future?
Great question. Like any technology, I feel its core purpose and ultimate practicality is in augmenting humans. If you go back to like whenever automobiles started becoming a thing, people would ride in carriages with horses and maybe some trains, or maybe not. But I don't fact check me on that. But at the very least, the carriages and the horses were there, right? So it's not like we jump straight to driverless vehicles or anything like that. And the reality is computers in practice are really, really dumb. What they're really good at is executing insane amounts of operations very, very quickly. And of course, with latest innovations and abstracting that and all kinds of interesting algorithms, and that's kind of where AI plays. I mean, all AI is effectively statistics at its core, and math. You can do some really interesting things. And with the compute power emerging, like there's just like a phenomenal environment to be in. But at the same time, computers are terrible at abstraction. And that's where it's a reverse with how humans operate. Humans are phenomenal at dealing with abstraction. Think driving. Driving is a very complex task for a computer. As a matter of fact, you need tons of algorithms coordinated, and even with all the advancements over the past couple of years, it's just not practical to put those driverless cars to let them to operate in a fully autonomous manner, because they'll end up in mistakes, right? Because, well, humans introduced the mistake. It's an imperfect environment. So with that, if we go to, let's say, the contact center, no agent on this planet enjoys reading FAQs off a script, or enjoys going through like routine tasks over and over again. So in that context, I think, and as applied to the contact center in particular, AI has been and will continue to drive automation for routine use cases, not just simple, complex as well, and I'll touch on that momentarily, allowing humans to deal with the most complex stuff. I think many of you have experienced this in practice, but I almost challenge you next time you're dealing with a more complicated thing, no matter if you're dealing with a bank, airline, hotel, doesn't matter, and you bring up the puzzle to the agent, they almost get a little excited. It's like, you're finally introducing something interesting in my day, right? But I think what we're going to see is just that optimization where humans will increasingly focus on the complex while the computers offload the rest. And I'm sure we'll touch on during the session, but there's specific reasons in the location I'm in. There's specific reasons why generative AI is not the panacea for the space, and in a lot of ways it never will be, because, well, I'm just going to state it, generative text in particular, it's de facto a big autocomplete. It's a damn good one if for end consumer use cases, but when you need it to be reliable, you're not looking in the right place. So maybe I went a little longer than you were hoping, Tom. But
no, well, it was a kind of a long question. So, just a quick follow up. Can you give like an example of an area that you're particularly excited about, of something you guys have developed for your customers that you're particularly excited about?
Yes. Well, it's probably worth highlighting that our platform helps drive a couple different things. One, it's easy to implement. So we're really focused on quick time to value. It can handle some of the most complex use cases out there today. And I'll specifically double click on that. And then it allows you to effectively work backwards from ideal use cases. So think flexibility. So instead of confining a customer, right? Let's say pick an enterprise. Instead of confining them to like, hey, we only do chatbots and they only work in this particular manner. Here's the out-of-the-box chat box that you slap on your website. Or we only do voice assistants that work in this particular way. Our platform is built in such a way where we ask our customers to forget about technology feasibility and sort of work backwards from the ideal use case. And most of the times we can enable that, which is really fun for both us and the customer. And in particular, the output of our platform are 3 different kinds of automated conversations: chat, voice, familiar with both of those as consumers in general, obviously, and as experts in the field. And then we have a special patented class in the multimodal space. Specifically, we have a patent that allows us to synchronize any bidirectional audio channel to a digital asset or an IoT device. And what that allows us to do over, let's say, the competition, it allows our customers to, if you think, or maybe working backwards a little bit, if you think about the call center volume, maybe 30 to 40% gets automated, FAQs, what's my balance, things like that. The remaining 60 to 70% is too complex for a voice-only channel, or there are simply use cases that just require a human agent based on what we talked about a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. But in that 60 to 70% bucket, you have routine things like password reset that, I think most call centers from around the world, irrespective of industry, language, etc., deal with that in a top 5 type of ranking. It's impractical to do that over voice, because you're not going to sit there to say, hey, my new password is uppercase this, lowercase that, special character. So then those calls have to go to an agent. Because of our multimodal capabilities, we can route those to, again, digital asset, for instance, like website, mobile app, and the voice assistant becomes a guide for the end user all the way to task completion. And if anything goes wrong along the way, basically that can get escalated to an agent. Because, by the way, we're huge proponents on, if you don't know what this is, just take it to an agent. Don't keep people in a loop. Don't annoy them. But then basically all that context flows through to an agent. And all of a sudden, you don't get this disconnected experience where, because I'm sure you've all experienced where you call in and you get sent a text and then the call drops because, hey, everyone wants to push to messaging. That's just not a good solution, let alone it's an accessibility point too. You could have a permanent disability, right? And talking might be the main form of communication. Or you have a temporary disability where you're driving, right? And no airlines that charge $50 to perform tasks that you could otherwise do on the website and mobile app, if you call them, that's not the solution to force people to use your applications. You should expect your customers to be able to reach you wherever they want, however they want, and be able to deliver a consistent service. So in that example, for instance, we can drive very high automation, but not just automation for the sake of containment, with very high customer satisfaction for use cases like, I mentioned password reset, but like adding a wheelchair to a flight, adding a service animal, adding pets, canceling reservations, like things that otherwise require human assistance now can be offloaded to this type of conversational AI that is just very effective.
Thank you.
Well, that was a good question, Tom. Good follow-up question and some great background, Andrei. I guess going kind of around the horn here, or whatever the shape this is we have on video, I'm going to go to John Arnold, who also, like me, is based in just outside of Toronto. We were talking about geographical dispersity as well across the BCStrategies. We have, Tom in Atlanta and John and I in Toronto. Evan is in Boston, Andrei is New York, and Blair is over on the West Coast. So we'll move east to west as it was. So John, I mean, I'm going to ask you, what questions do you have? But as well, I mean, maybe explore a little bit, because, what we hear a lot as BCStrategies experts, we hear a lot of similar kind of philosophies, right, in terms of improving the customer experience. I mean, when Andrei talks about what NLX.ai does, kind of what comes to mind? What are your key questions for Andrei?
So, the first thing for me, Andrei, that comes to mind is, all of the speech and language-based engines are, the big players dominate a lot of this stuff because they have the means. I mean, these are volume-based, scale-based, problem sets you're trying to solve. So coming into this game not as one of those players, I want to ask two pieces. One is, what kind of a niche do you see to just differentiate yourself and get attention? Mm-hmm. And secondly is, we all see this as analysts, where we talk to the vendors all day long. We kind of know what the leading edge looks like and what the vendors are selling. But when you get out to talk to the customers and the channels, they're still trying to get to first base just with the cloud. And so a lot of this stuff is running a little too fast for them. So it seems like a lot of this is still very much kind of supply driven, then demand driven, more vendor driven. So I want to get your sense for what's driving you. Where are you in particular seeing demand, like the problem sets customers are actually looking for and willing to spend money on? So that's a bit of a two-part question, but they're related.
No, good, very good questions. Well, for one, architecturally, we strongly differentiate in that we do not build our own models, and that's very purposeful. When I was at American Express, as I mentioned, I built their conversational AI platform from the ground up. And I was exposed, thankfully, to a majority of the top NLP providers in the market. And in practice, as we were assessing them, the interesting thing was the AI wasn't the main driver of automation. It was the content. And because it didn't matter if you could tell that I'm trying to file a dispute with 70 or 90% accuracy. If you don't have conversational content to engage me to automate the dispute, I had to take it to an agent anyways. So basically, that particular thing stuck with me. And that allows us to effectively float above all the other technology providers in the market, especially the ones that provide the core functionality, like the NLP, let's say the Amazon Lexis, the Google Dialogflows, the different LLM providers. All of those have a place within the lifecycle of a good conversational AI application, but standalone, they're not sufficient. NLX provides that layer that brings the business problems closest to the customer. And I'll touch on that second question that you had, John, momentarily, where basically, you have all these technologies, but ultimately, that's not the customer's problem. They couldn't care less for AI and NLP and all of this speech to text. They have an operational problem that they're looking to solve more often than not. And the easier we can make it for them to address that problem in a practical way, we don't like magic, the better it is for our customers. So in that, we give our customers choice to pick their own NLP. As I mentioned, you want to pick Amazon Lex or Google Dialogflow or Microsoft Lewis or Nuance, by all means, enable integration, you're done. Do you want to leverage OpenAI or Amazon Titan or one of the bedrock LLMs on open source or deploy it on your cloud premises? By all means, pick it. They all do the same thing. Some are better than others, but functionally, they have the exact same function. But then there's a lot more complexity when it comes to, well, how do you handle multiple languages? How many channels do you integrate? I mean, yeah, it's easy to handle the social channels and, again, put a chatbot on your website. But we have customers, for instance, one of our customers is Comcast. Comcast has probably one of the largest conversational AI deployments on the planet. And they don't just have the traditional channels. They have the TV, the X1, they have the remote, right? So like, how do you address the complexities of such companies in a way that's consistent, where you can build these applications? That's one, but then also maintain them and improve them on an ongoing basis. Going back again to my American Express days, I've seen everything from thousands of Taylor Swift concert ticket goers ask for last-minute concert tickets. We didn't find out about that until 2 months after the fact, when we were going manually through the logs, because Nuance, which was the NLP vendor we picked at the time, didn't have capabilities to surface those insights, all the way to suicide notes. Nothing can prepare anyone to see something like that or deal with it. So ultimately, I've experienced in practice the complexity and the black box or Pandora's box that occurs once you deploy these applications in practice. So rather than selling magic to customers, we sell them a practical approach in a combination of technology and processes, design, etc., to solve real business problems in a way that works, in a way where you can catch trends, in a way that you can deploy across multiple languages and multiple channels, in a way that you can integrate all kinds of systems that you need, in a way that your customers' data is secure and compliant with all the different compliance programs out there. And once we kind of drive from there, what happens next is we typically land somewhere on the contact center side 90% of the time. And what's fascinating, especially with the large enterprises we work with, then it starts percolating to the other parts of the business. Well, then the HR group wants something, then the IT department wants something, then the gate agent operation at the airlines wants something. And all of a sudden, we become the conversational infrastructure for these companies. So ultimately, we like to just kind of blow through the smoke, tell them when something's feasible, when something's not feasible, but ultimately ask, like, what are you actually trying to solve? And let's just work backwards from that. And we've purposely built a platform to enable that type of approach.
Yeah, I think, okay, so that's, that focus on business outcomes and practicality and pragmatism. I think that kind of, is different than just kind of hyping the magic technology. I don't know, moving over to somebody who's both pragmatic and hype, I don't know. Are you more hype or pragmatic, Evan? I don't know. But you're on mute. Oh my goodness.
You think we would have learned. But yeah, so thanks. I'm 99% hype, 1%
okay,
practical.
I wasn't sure. So but yeah, so with what Andrei's saying, I mean, and then you get a chance to talk to, more, a combination of both pragmatic and kind of hype people. So kind of what key questions do you have of Andrei and NLX?
Yeah, Andrea, congratulations on what you're doing. Super exciting. I'm curious, you've been in the practical, pragmatic world of AI for 5+ years, sounds like more, before the latest hype cycle around OpenAI and Gen AI and all the excitement. So what's been the effect on the business and the opportunity? Has this been like rocket fuel to an already big opportunity? Are you spending a lot of time like educating enterprise customers on the realities of integrating with OpenAI? Is it creating more friction for your sales and go to market when you have to kind of demystify and decode what OpenAI, ChatGPT is doing? I imagine there's a bit of both.
Yeah, lots of fuel, primarily fuel. And what's been great is our approach to just the sales process hasn't really changed. And what's been great is, for better or worse, every single company out there is trying to leverage this in some way, shape, or form. And the better or worse part is, executives, especially from large companies, just go to their direct reports, and in turn that just kind of trickles down. It's like, we have to use Gen AI. And of course, everything, when people say Gen AI, they glance, or even AI, right? Like, they overwhelmingly refer to the conversational piece that ChatGPT has popularized since the beginning of the year, even though obviously it's such a vast area. And what typically ends up happening is we then get a lot of deal flow. We start talking to customers. There's a lot of the educational component, because through our platform, we can enable them to build ChatGPT style sort of interactions. But then we put the disclaimer to it, is you probably don't want to do this. Like, I mean, here's some concrete examples. When it comes, the bulk majority of your automation, if you're an enterprise, comes from business processes. And business processes are very structured. All AI ML systems are statistical. Statistics are imperfect by definition. Therefore, any AI ML system is imperfect. So all of a sudden, yeah, if you miss the intent of what the customer wants, not great, but it's okay. You can send them to an agent. You can try to disambiguate. But if you're in the business process, you're not going to let the AI to decide to skip 3 steps in your disputes process or your booking process just because the confidence score told it that day. So that's kind of where that teachable component comes into play, where yes, if you want to leverage some of the latest innovations, here are practical areas where you can do it internally. If you have use cases that tolerate imperfection, phenomenal stuff to drive for like KBs and things like that, and all kinds of very interesting use cases there. But even for internal use cases, when it comes to HR, you might not want to use the pure generative component, right? You might want to use embeddings and other components like that, because you can't afford to provide incorrect information in highly regulated industries, or to customer-facing use cases where basically you might be legally liable, or you might deal with brand reputational damage and things like that. So ultimately, it's been a combination of those two things. So fuel and just giving us an opportunity to drive with thought leadership and find jointly with the customers appropriate, like a balance. Because some customers truly have tolerance for playing more with the generative text one, but it's hardly ever, if at all, on the customer-facing side of the house. And I've also noticed, I'm curious what your take is on this, but like I've noticed over the past couple of months, more and more buyers are more aware of what's truly feasible with these latest technologies, and where kind of like, again, that intersection of practicality and hype is, which further accelerates or just betters our process, because that's where we sit. So then they're looking for something that we already have, and then we then guide them through the rest of the
Yeah, no, as someone who plays with ChatGPT all day, and all of us here do, you really see the art of the possible now in ways you couldn't firsthand experience in most cases.
That's exactly it. And let's not detract from the fact that it is a phenomenal tool and technology, and it has great applications, but they don't trickle down to every single part of the enterprise, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not convinced that people understand kind of yet the kind of the art of the possible versus the art of the reality. But you mentioned, Andrei, that kind of 90% of your time, a starting place for NLX and organization may be the contact center. So and then it expands from there. So I can't think of a better person than Blair Pleasant to talk about the contact center, and then what she loves to talk about is, perhaps that expansion, the contact center plus unified communication. So, Blair, we're getting to you kind of as the last expert, and so you've heard all the previous questions. What key questions have we not asked that you are interested in to ask Andrei?
Yeah, I had a list of questions, and as you guys were going through them, I was crossing them out. But yeah. So as analysts, we like to, put vendors in buckets. Gartner has different quadrants and everything. So can you talk a little bit about, who are your key competitors so that we can, kind of see, okay, so this is, the bucket you're in. So who are your key competitors? And you mentioned multimodal, but what are some of your other areas of differentiation? I know you talk about change management and being able to make changes quickly and easily. So talk a little bit about, where you fit in the buckets and how you differentiate also.
Certainly. For one, we compete against the enterprise conversational AI companies. To maybe put it through a different lens, the Gartner ones. We've never really paid Gartner, so I guess we're not as close to showing up on any quadrant, but we've run up against just about every player in that quadrant, ranging from Core AI, Cognigy, Yellow, and whatever else is there. We've won at least a deal against every single one of them, so we're pretty comfortable in stating that that's our sweet spot. Beyond our multimodal capabilities, which are patented, and that's helped us quite a bit in kind of setting up our blue ocean, if you may, of opportunity there. We also differentiate in that we don't shy away. And as a matter of fact, we love spending time with the largest and most complex companies on the planet. And more specifically, we love taking their mission critical workloads. I know some of the vendors and a majority of the vendors I kind of cited, they tend to do a lot of back office automation, like bots for internal HR, for IT, for this and that. And of course, they do some customer facing one too, but not as prevalent, and that most of the times not key operational. And because of my exposure to that at American Express, arguably probably one of the best customer service operations on the planet, I've managed to find like-minded individuals in my team members who both enjoy the challenge and love sitting and solving problems with the customer side by side. To be honest with you, it took us a little while to get to the types of customers that would allow us to touch that, right? It's the most guarded, other than customers' data, it's probably the most well, I guess we're touching customers' data too, but like it's the most closely guarded part of any business. And once you get there, there's complexities there that, they're challenging, but at the same time, they're repeatable across customers and industries. And we found great success with that. And that's where our platform truly differentiates. We haven't, and I haven't touched on this as much, but the platform as we conceptualized it 5.5 years ago, time flies, we got to feature completion of that initial vision about half a year ago. So we didn't just react to the market and how things came to be. We knew what needed to be built, and we went deep. So typically when we talk to customers, they've all been exposed to this. They've either worked with our competitors or have worked with our competitors, or they built something in-house. There's hardly ever a company we talk to, especially large enterprise, who haven't dabbled with something in the space. But then what typically happens is they start running through their pain points. Like, well, what about this? Here. Well, what about that? There. 99% of the time, we have an answer that's already addressed through the product. And that sort of flexibility of the platform and the thoughtfulness of the features that go, again, breadth and depth, gets those types of companies to come to NLX. And we've been very fortunate to work with some phenomenal global brands who have trusted us early on, and we've grown with them and they've grown with us. And they became the building blocks for where we are today, and of course for where we're headed.
Kevin, can I ask one more question? So I know you have some very large, well-known customers. Can you give us some specific examples? And you don't have to name the names of the customers, but some of their use cases, because we were talking about use cases a bit, and to me that's just so important, especially for businesses and organizations to understand. You talked about the art of the possible. Without really knowing what use cases others have done, it's sort of hard to think, oh yeah, that's something I can do. So can you drill down into some of the use cases your customers are doing?
Absolutely. Everything. First of all, we're industry and use case agnostic, so we go deep on a handful of things. Everything from service disruptions, like when, say, major infrastructure providers have service disruptions and customers call in, and sort of how do you navigate that? How do you put them at ease? How do you troubleshoot? To device installation, where, say, you call in an energy provider for, I guess that's infrastructure too, but I was thinking of different use cases. But basically, you need to install some form of IoT device or something in your home that you just purchased. Adding wheelchairs and service animals to flights, managing reservations of all kinds, travel, hospitality, rental cars, what have you, all the way to internal things like internal HR, like dealing with employee absences. And of course, there's policies and FAQs, but I like to call out the business processes, because we like the meatiness of that and the complexity that oftentimes we can uniquely handle, all the way to gate agent operations from an air travel standpoint to, we had an interesting one for like a very large auto manufacturer, where they have these troves of repair instructions and manuals. Like we're talking like just for a specific make model, like 10,000 pages, right? And that's just for a particular year. And then you have repair technicians who often have to debug all kinds of things for the vehicles. And it's very complicated to deal with that. And the materials, even if you find them, because generally you get like hundreds of results back during these queries, you get like tons of jargon and pages they have to sit through. That's a fantastic use case for generative AI, by the way. A combination of pure generative text, but then also with grounding and where you found the information. So really very, very broad, everything from customer-facing business processes to internal-facing business processes to knowledge interactions, both generative and pure. Let's say you identify use cases. I mean, you identify answers to some FAQs, but then you reference the brand-approved language versus like a generated one. And everything in between.
Thank you.
That's a lot of use cases. And a pet peeve is nobody reads those manuals. If you got 10, for sure, if it's 10,000 pages, they can't read. But okay, so Tom, I think you had one last quick question, and I guess a quick question and maybe a quick answer, Andrei. Go for it, Tom.
I just to follow up a little bit on the multimodal, because that kind of seems to be just such a huge differentiator. How did that kind of, what is the genesis of that concept? I know you just covered a couple of use cases, but maybe if you have one more that you could just drill in just a little bit more on kind of how that kind of comes together.
To be perfectly honest with you, it wasn't a day one type of thing. Initially, we would support chat and voice, but being really customer driven and customer centric, we were faced with a challenge at some point. Again, volume, where largely over voice you automate 30 to 40% of those use cases. And we started asking the question, what happens to the other 60 to 70%? Why is that not getting automated? Then we started looking at the use cases. Okay, well, these are like pretty complex. We reached the conclusion pretty quickly as to why those can get automated over voice. But then we asked the next question, which is, well, how does the agent deal with it? Because I remember from when I was at American Express, sorry to keep referencing it, but there were lots of learnings there. When you call Amex for, let's say, replacing your card or filing a dispute or something, the poor human being on the other end of the line, they take you through the exact same process that you can go through by yourself on the website. Except when you're filing your dispute, the agent will be like, oh, I'm so sorry that you're trying to, that the $200 from Macy's, that you're trying to get that back or whatever happened. And then as you go through the process, they just give you a little bit of extra something in comfort that you're doing the right thing because you're emotionally invested in whatever problem you're trying to address. So after analyzing that, the final question was like, well, can we replicate that in any form in an automated fashion? And that's where we landed on, well, we had the idea of like, well, could we, again, synchronize the voice assistant to whatever the customer is doing on their screen to drive that. And we had some ideas, we tested them in practice. Thankfully, they worked. Then we patented it, and from there, it's history. But basically, it was just very, honestly, sitting close to the customers and to the use cases drives all the innovation that you need, which is why we love to sit there. We don't react. That's why we don't react as much to the hype or what the competitors are doing, because ultimately our customers look to us to help them innovate. So then that's our full-time job. And at the same time, I tell my team, make sure you basically build better product. We don't want to keep throwing more people at the problem. Just make it easier through technology.
I think that's a great place to kind of end with, kind of your focus on solving real customer problems. I guess, but here's my offer to you. I mean, we asked you a lot of questions, Andrei. I don't know. Is there one question you want to direct? You can pick any expert and ask them any question, or I don't know. Is there something that, yeah.
Well, without putting someone specifically on the spot, I am very curious if you have one prediction for where the market will go in the next year. I don't like the 5-year ones because it's easy to just kind of like go very broad. Yeah, is that
Blair?
You're pointing towards me, Blair, on my side, but I'm happy to pick.
The market is going to go up. I mean, there's
okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can't have a conversation without this being a big topic, and so AI in general we know is going up. Conversational AI is being used in so many areas. Generative AI, of course, but we started our predictions for next year, doing podcasts and things. What are your predictions? So the one that I did recently basically said there's going to be a lot of trial and error and a lot of misstarts, and there's going to be a lot of companies that try this and say, oh, it didn't work the way I wanted it to, and customers are getting pissed off, so we're going to back off. So I think the market is definitely going to go up and usage is going to go up, but there's also going to be a lot of trial and error and a lot of mistakes made along the way.
Well, so I think I think that's great. I mean, this is, with the short thing, maybe we can just go kind of around the horn. I mean, Evan, you were giving a thumbs up, so maybe just a quick soundbite. Your prediction.
Well, big tech's going to get bigger, and I suspect if they don't acquire companies like NLX and others, they're going to go deeper into the enterprise. Right now, they're charging, $20 a month to all comers or the API. I think they want to go deeper in the enterprise and start working in a more meaningful way with enterprises like NLX is doing. So watch them to do that, just like AWS did. They have a very, very focused enterprise play, go to market. So there'll be more of that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely makes sense. That whole kind of like, let's be pragmatic and bring stuff that actually solves problems. John, real quick, comments, predictions?
Yeah, just a quick extension of what Blair was saying. I think, I don't think, Andrei, we heard much talk about no code, low code here. I think you might have touched on it earlier, but I think that the trend there is going to be, I think more contact centers are going to try to figure some of this stuff out themselves because the tools are there. But that's where the trial and error is going to come in. They'll make more errors than hits for sure. But that may kind of put a bit of a hiccup in some of your growth plans. If people are trying to do this themselves, realize they can't get very far, and then that will boomerang back. And I think maybe after that trial and error phase runs its course, there'll be more opportunity for you. But to recognize that right, you're offering very rich capabilities, but your customers can use the same tools themselves, and we'll find out pretty quickly the ones who are able to do without what you're doing and those who are going to need more of it.
Absolutely.
That's good. And Tom, something quick from you.
I think, we're going to see the big guys obviously do really, really well. I think kind of, be below them, I see huge value in kind of the convergence of multiple technologies as being, huge benefit. Or I don't see those guys, really playing in that. They'll provide the tools, but the ones that are able to put it together, I think will be very successful in actually making real improvements going beyond just the, oh, well, we added ChatGPT to our contact center. So you're talking about a very, very important convergence, and that's kind of that device and IoT convergence with AI. And I think that's super cool. So I definitely look forward to following you guys in the future.
Yeah, and thanks, Tom. And I'll add, I just read a fascinating study by Boston Consulting Group about using kind of generative AI, and they did a study about what types of queries did it actually help their consultants. And the fascinating thing to me, and I think this is anchored on, the pragmatism that you talked about, Andrei, and Blair, you started by just talking about how there'll be a lot of missteps. The study was fascinating to me because, what happened was there was some cases where the consultants changed the results coming from the generative AI and actually gave them poorer results. And the people that performed best were when they didn't change the results, and vice versa. So I think that there is going to be a lot of learning as people, use this technology. And I think it's great to hear from, kind of companies like NLX that are so anchored in driving those business outcomes. And as you say, Andrei, not shying away from some of the most complicated challenges. So thank you for your time. Thank you to all of the BCStrategies experts. We have lots of opinions, lots of thoughts, lots of questions, and thousands of articles at BCStrategies.com. And I know, Andrei, you just touched the kind of surface of what NLX does. And I know as well, because I looked ahead of time, as did we all, there's lots more information if people are interested by going to your website. Thank you all, and thank you for joining this BCStrategies Industry Buzz.
Thank you so much, everyone. Great seeing you.
Bye all. Thanks again.
See you guys.